High Desert Radio is brought to you in part by Eurozone Food Distributors. Established in 2009, Eurozone Food Distributors is dedicated to providing the widest range of European food options to New Mexico, including foods from Poland, Romania, Spain, and many others. Located at 3700 Osuna Road Northeast on the southwest corner of Osuna and Academy Parkway in the Osuna Business Center. Eurozone Food Distributors. Online at eurozonefoodsnm.com. Welcome to High Desert Radio, the voice of the Jewish Federation of New Mexico. This edition features an insightful discussion between Dr. Marvin Gottlieb, John Sandager, and Randy Neal about the evolving relationship between Christians and Jews, how both communities envision that relationship continuing to develop into the future, and what role Isreal has played in enhancing this interfaith partnership. We also touch on the important and powerful work of Christians United for Israel, known as CUFI, to enhance Christian understanding of the Jewish people and to bolster support of the State of Israel and its causes. Before we get started, a few words about our participants in today's discussion. Dr. Marvin Gottlieb is the president of the Jewish Federation of New Mexico, and he is a past program chair for the National Council of Christians and Jews. John Sandager is a licensed attorney in New Mexico who's practiced law for 38 years. He's been a board member of the Jewish Community Center in Albuquerque for 11 years. He's been a national speaker for Christians in support of Israel and spoke at an international conference in Israel on Christian reconciliation with Jews. In 2006, Pastor John Hagee invited Randy Neal to become CUFI's first full-time grassroots organizer. Randy came to the organization with over a decade of experience in educating Christians about the biblical mandate to support Israel, the history of Christian antisemitism, and political activism in the faith community. And now, to our discussion.
First of all, I'd like to thank you, John and Randy, for agreeing to participate in this project. One of the things that's been of primary interest, certainly to the Jewish community, is the growth of dialogue and collaboration between our two communities, the Christian and Jewish communities. And this dialogue, of course, has major significance for the world, definitely for our constituents, and, of course, for Israel. I think that hopefully this will lead to a greater understanding of the Christian community's interest in Israel. And we would also like to discuss CUFI's mission and, by extension, how that translates into embracing the Jewish people. So I'd like to begin with a question about CUFI. I understand it was established over 10 years ago. Can you provide our listeners with an overview of what generated the need for this organization and CUFI's mission and goals?
Yes, I will. This is Randy Neal. I'm the Western Regional Coordinator for Christians United for Israel, and it's an honor to be on this program. I have to say that in the 13 western states that I cover, New Mexico is by far one of the strongest as far as the Christian and Jewish relationships go and working partnerships, and that is in no small part thanks to the work and efforts of John and Susie Sandager with just everything that they've been able to do on the grassroots local level there, working with the Federation as well. And you're correct. We're in our 11th year. We were founded in February of 2006 with 412 members, and today we just turned the corner at 3.6 million members. We're the largest pro-Israel organization in the country. And though we're 11 years old, we were really birthed more than 3 decades ago when our founder and national chair, Pastor John Hagee, as he tells the story, he went to Israel as a tourist and he came back as a Zionist. And he felt a burden to do something tangible and relevant for the Jewish people, but he just didn't know what that would be. And that presented itself when Israel did the preemptive strike on the Iraqi nuclear reactor. And international media was criticizing Israel, called it gunboat diplomacy. And Pastor Hagee just took a step back, and he thought this tiny nation just took nuclear weapons out of the hands of a maniacal dictator, and he thought that Israel had done the world a favor. So he decided, he rented the convention center in San Antonio and went on, he was going to do basically an evening of solidarity with their choir and orchestra to just send a message to the local Jewish community and hopefully to the nation of Israel that they did indeed have friends in the Christian community. And as soon as the press release went public, the phone at the church rang, voice on the other end said, Hagee will be dead by Friday. They shut out the windows in his car. His wife, Diana, said, we didn't take a class on this in seminary. And he said, look, we're going to keep our word to the Jewish community. We're going to do this one event, and we're going to close that book and move on. It's just a single event. It was not the kickoff of an organization or even an annual event. It was a one-time response to an international incident. And the night of the event, a bomb threat was phoned in that the security detachment took seriously enough to start evacuating the building. And that was kind of the line in the sand. Pastor Hagee doesn't manipulate very well. And he just said, if that's how these anti-Semites feel about this, we'll do it every year until they get used to it. And people were flying from all over the country to San Antonio to see what this looked like, with this, the nature of this event. And they were replicating it all over the country, Bakersfield, California, and Orlando, Florida, and Houston. And it became very clear that the Christian community, wanted a vehicle where they could, lock arms together and corporately have a more tangible impact. And so CUFI was born, and we're doing our best to keep up with it. It's growing in leaps and bounds. Our campus division is perhaps one of the most relevant things we do. We're going to hit the 400 campus mark with student leaders on campuses, trying to level the playing field to make sure that Israel's fairly and accurately portrayed on our college campuses. And we just we're about to break the 700 mark on bringing hundreds of pastors to Israel to have that life-changing experience where they can see and experience Israel firsthand. And when they hear those blood libel allegations that it's an apartheid state or that it's a racist state, they can respond with their own authority from their firsthand experience. And it's that has proven to be a game changer for us. And actually, that segues in that I'm about to bring 30 pastors from New Mexico. Virtually the entire trip will be pastors from New Mexico, and they're going to have this experience of being inoculated against the absolute horrendous anti-Israel narrative that they'll be exposed to, but they'll be equipped on how to respond and squelch it.
That's an absolutely amazing story of growth and commitment. I know when I got involved in interfaith work many years ago, we were sort of a select community. I mean, there weren't a lot of people who were engaged in that, which leads me to my next question, which is, how would you compare this dynamic that we're experiencing today with 25 or 30 years ago? Has it changed? Do you feel we're becoming closer? What are some of the factors that contributed to this positive evolution? John, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think my Jewish friends have taught me a term, beshert, meaning meant to be, God ordained, however you translate it. And CUFI, I think, was there at the right time, at the right place, in the hearts and minds of the Christian community, because, and I'll use Christianese terms now, I think there's been a calling, a stirring, I would almost like to use the word revival, of interest, genuine interest in Israel and her people. The whole world became aware of Israel, the nation, and was, I think, for the most part, the United States, very, very sympathetic and understanding and supportive. But it went beyond that, because Christians who are, we believe, Bible believers, along with the Jews, have been called people of the book, you can't read the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, or the New Testament without seeing Israel all over it and the Jewish people and God's relationship with the Jewish people. So we as Christians believe that we're grafted into that. We came out of Judaism, not out of Hinduism or Buddhism or Islam, but it's a part of our DNA, in a sense, our spiritual DNA. And I think there was a stirring of I would say, God himself bringing this together, and then along comes CUFI, which gave them the vehicle to express and learn and grow. In Albuquerque, we started an organization, very loose organization called Yad B'Yad, which is Hebrew for hand in hand, before there was a CUFI. And it was because there was an interest started with my wife and I, Susie, about learning more about Israel. And we brought Christians together and supported some Israel causes that we could support. Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem was one. And we brought in Jewish speakers because we realized there was a hunger for understanding our Jewish roots and understanding the Jewish people that we worked with and went to school with and so on and so forth. And so what happened is that grew as we had Jewish speakers. They felt like they were comfortable with us and we were comfortable with them. And so it grew into an organization of Christians and Jews coming together. And I would be honest to say there are certain issues we don't agree on, generally speaking, but there's a lot of issues we do agree on, not just Israel, but primarily Israel. And so it's a whole movement that has no logical explanation, to tell you the truth, and logical human explanation, but rather I think it's a part of a natural movement that has been raised up. And I think an important thing is it's not an abstract thing of Israel, a nation, or this country I've been there 12 times and it's a long airplane ride away. It's more about the people and our Jewish friends that have become real friends. And it's taken a long time because the Jews in our area, Albuquerque, I think are reasonably representative of Jews around the world, especially the United States, where they would have skepticism and concern. What are the motives of this new friendship of Christians and Jews?
Right, yeah.
Because
that was leading me to the next question, which was, it's fairly obvious that there are geographic connections between the Christian community and the Jewish community because Christianity's most holy sites are there. But there is some question about the affinity with the Jewish people themselves. That I think that's where you were going.
Yeah, and I think I would be very honest to say that there is a logical, reasonable, practical question on Jews as to why Christians are nice to them, because historically we weren't. That terrible two words, Christian antisemitism, which is deplorable, but it's a part of real history, which, by the way, Christians don't know about. We've tore those out of our history books somehow. But nonetheless, so anytime a Jew was approached by a Christian in a nice manner, oftentimes and probably predominantly it was to convert them. So I'll be nice to you, Mr. Jew, if you'll become a Christian, and if you won't, then I'm going to walk away from you. And that's no basis for friendship or relationship or communication. And I think Christians have realized that we don't need to go there. We can respect each other. And as the Jews of this community in Albuquerque and New Mexico, after observing and being critical analysis, which is fair, I think they've seen, no, it is an honest relationship of wanting to learn about each other, again, because we have this foundational of spiritual affinity. That's my answer.
All right.
Dr. Marvin, I think I'd like to kind of underscore what John just said, because I can point to just sort of dates actually that go right to the heart of your question. You asked 25, 30 years ago as opposed to today. Well, 30 years ago, after that event that I just described at the convention center and people flying in to try to learn how to replicate it, Pastor Hagee did a 3-day conference. He invited 30 of what you could argue to be generals in the Christian community, people that owned publishing companies and broadcasting companies and oversaw, a number of different seminaries. These are guys that had armies beneath them and, had the bandwidth to take a hill. And he brought them to San Antonio. And on day one, when they broke for lunch, he unveiled a dynamic of this would-be organization that was absolutely foreign to the Christian paradigm of thought. And that is that this would be an event-driven organization. And these events are not church services. They will be by design and without exception non-conversionary to the Jewish people. They broke for lunch. 29 of the 30 called their office, said, "Get me an earlier flight home. I want nothing to do with an organization like this."
Wow.
Fast forward to 2005, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was asking the world to imagine itself without Zionism and America. And Pastor Hagee was, made some calls to some of his friends, and they said, "Yeah, it's time to try it again." And this time he invited 412 leaders, and these on their own dime this time, and braced his family and staff that it'd be like a hornet's nest when they got to that non-conversionary dynamic again. And when they unveiled it, you could have heard a pin drop. And they said, we're here to ask you how many of you will join us 5 months in Washington, D.C. to send a message to our elected officials that it's not just their Jewish constituents that want to guard U.S.-Israel relations. And all 400 hands went up. So it was a sea change from just 3 decades earlier and I think that in that time, as John touched on, I think during that time, at least I saw in my circles, that there was an epiphany that Christians were having about the Jewish roots of their Christian faith, the Jewishness of Jesus. Jesus wasn't a Christian, Mary wasn't a Catholic, John wasn't a Baptist. They were all Jews. And Christians began to connect those dots and have a much greater reverence, respect, and appreciation for the Jewish roots of the Christian faith and understanding Judaism, and in turn trying to befriend members in the Jewish community to try to foster genuine relationship.
That's really terrific movement over the last 3 decades, and of course to everybody's advantage. I'm just curious about maybe on a more personal level, what are some of the things that you've learned about the Jewish people through your work on Israel's behalf and this dialogue with the Jewish community?
I would have to say from the Jewish community, the compassion, moral clarity, the healing the world, trying to leave the world a better place than the one you inherited, is something that just is a constant throughout the community. And then to kind of add that, to expand that question as to about Israel, the same answer plus just the resiliency, the absolute refusal to succumb to terrorism and to if a pizza parlor gets bombed, guess where we're going to have lunch tomorrow? There's right. The absolute resilience to not let evil win, and to stand on their moral high ground.
Right. As this dialogue continues between our communities, are there some aspects of Judaism and the Jewish community and the way it functions that you feel you could benefit from a deeper understanding? How can the Jewish community help you increase your knowledge in this regard?
I think they're doing everything they can by being honest and open. And, Marvin, I really appreciate the word dialogue, but that's so sterile a word. That's, to me, like people getting on a stage and having a forum or something. Right. And very honestly, there have been dialogues between denominations for years, but I'll use a good example of a heart check. When the first Intifada came, or when the boycott, divestiture, sanction came, some of those same denominations within Christendom turned their back on Israel and called them apartheid. And I think Not that the evangelicals are any better than any other people or group or denomination, but they're the ones, the real Bible-seeking people that went to Jerusalem, and Israel saw that. Israel saw evangelicals coming in the first intifada and second intifada in spite of the risks. And it wasn't just a dialogue which was superficial. It was a real, genuine interest. And that's, I guess, a little inexplicable still. But I think that as we get to know each other as people, not just co-workers, I'm an attorney by profession, and I've practiced in law firms, and I have lots of friends who are Jewish lawyers or Jewish this and that. But we've gone beyond the separation and gone to what do we have in common? And we have a lot in common, an enormous amount. I find that outside of just the religious/spiritual spectrum, we also share a lot of the tikkun olam, to heal the world. Although an awful lot of Christians would be probably more conservative, right-leaning, and I hate those labels, but we all share the same beliefs that, as the commandments say, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, I think the Jews have been a tremendous teacher and mentor is what it means to really love your neighbor as yourself. So I think we appreciate more and more as we get to know each other more and more what we do have in common, and I think there's an enormous respect. Again, we're going to disagree with some of the positions that maybe perhaps, again, quote, liberal Jew may take, but there's far more things that we can agree on. So it's been a lot of, there's been a brick wall between us, and I think slowly over the years, the CUFIs and more than, not just the CUFIs, the individuals have been tearing down those bricks, and it takes the Jewish people to pull down the bricks too, because it takes both sides to create a real friendship.
Right, and certainly I know here in New Mexico, we know your community walks the walk for sure. Members of the Christian community have in many ways fully engaged with Jewish organizations, and certainly as an example, John, you have served on the board of the JCC for many years, and your lovely wife, Susie, is currently serving on the board of the Jewish Federation.
Thank you. One of the things I wanted to say where this relationship developed years ago, because we started to trust each other and we're open, and I think the Jews understood, we got a call from the head of the Anti-Defamation League, Susan Seligman, and she was very concerned because some of our students at the church I attend were overzealous in their evangelism and approached some Jewish young people at the local Albuquerque Academy and were disrespectful, inappropriate, and just out of line when it came to talking to them about Christianity. She had the confidence to call us about this, and I then went to our student pastor and explained the situation, educated our people, and that only happens because she trusted me to take that in the right vein and know that I would try and do something about it. That was after years of learning to trust each other, and I'm not going to be afraid to say it, learn to love each other.
Right. And as I say, you've demonstrated certainly your commitment to both what we're talking about and for the involvement with the Jewish community. I'm wondering, if we turn that around, what opportunities might there be for members of the Jewish community to become more involved in Christian community organizations? I mean, is that an option? Is that a way to increase this connection in some way?
I think we're stronger together. I think, again, Christians United for Israel is, it largely accomplishes what it does and moves the needle with events as a vehicle. And those meetings and gatherings and the relationships that are born out of them just are richer, as we partner together. We try to come together to convey solidarity. I'm afraid I'm not going to like the way this is going to sound, but in the horrific display of anti-Semitism and racism that we saw in Charlottesville, Virginia, there were pro-Israel organizations that felt compelled that they had to issue a press release denouncing anti-Semitism. And if you think about it, if you take a step back, it's absolutely ludicrous that a pro-Israel organization would have to publicly state that they condemn anti-Semitism. So we decided we're not going to issue a press release. We're going to go to Charlottesville, and next week we're going to be doing a seminar with a Holocaust survivor that's going to bring a very sobering message that we've heard rhetoric like this before. Nobody took it seriously, and try to just try to really bring it to the need, and the churches in that community are rallying around it, and it'll be the first time for many Christian leaders there to really start understanding the history that John mentioned and that I spoke of, and learning that we can't rewrite our history. We've got Christians spent 1,700 plus years building a pretty formidable wall of fear and mistrust, and we're just now trying to chip away at it. We can't rewrite it, but we are mobilizing our peers to change the trend so that history doesn't repeat itself.
One of the things I think the Jews can do is be willing to come to Christian events that are non-offensive and appropriate. For example, at our church, we've had a Jewish speaker. He wasn't messianic, and we don't go there. And we allowed him to use our forum, and the house was packed with Jews and Christians, and that's what Yad B'Yad does. I had in my own Sunday school class, I teach an adult Sunday school class. It's a large class of about 150, and I had a former rabbi, Paul Citron from Albuquerque, speak to my class. And I had to make sure that my management, I'm an elder in the church, so I was one of them, but made sure that they understood that he's not trying to convert us to Judaism, but rather just to help us understand. We were studying in the Tanakh, the festivals of Judaism, which Christians find just beautiful. And there's a lot of people that are returning to their Jewish roots, sometimes inappropriately, because we're not Jews, but again, trying to understand our heritage. And I think when Jews are, it's difficult for a Jew to go to a Baptist church or a XYZ church. It's uncomfortable. And it's also uncomfortable for Christians to go to a synagogue. I remember the first time I went to the synagogue, I didn't know what to expect. And I was impressed by the solemnity and the reverence and so on and so forth. It was a wonderful experience. But it took a person to invite me. So I think that's a part of it. You can have national organizations which are wonderful, but it gets down to a friend inviting a friend to go to the synagogue, go to a church, or hear a good speaker that they know will be fair and unoffensive to either party.
Just in the vein of what John was speaking about, I've seen, people try to approach this, and they're trying, they're looking at what they can do to build a bridge or to have a standing appointment for coffee. Or I know pastors that went on a trip 5 years ago, and we had rabbis on the trip. And to this day, years later, they still get together every other Friday, and they teach out of both the Hebrew and Greek scriptures each other what it means to them, and the relationships that are born are amazing. But I would say for all of the Jewish listeners of this program, when you invite a Christian to have Shabbat dinner in your home, and when they look at what really transpires at a Shabbat, and I've often said that if the Christian community could embrace and emulate a Shabbat type of dinner, the fabric of this nation would be virtually bulletproof. Where they see their father give thanks to the Lord, they see their father bless their mom. Each child receives a blessing from their father. No Game Boys are on, no cell phones are on, unless if you're not in the emergency room, you're at the dinner table, and that just lays such a strong foundation that is sorely lacking in the Christian community. And that would, and to me, when we bring pastors to Israel, that's when that invariably is the high point of the entire trip, is having dinner in someone's home and being taught what those different, traditions and steps in a Shabbat dinner represent and mean, and they come back changed. And it's, I just would throw that out there, that if there's folks that want to extend that olive branch, I think that I think you'd be encouraged by how deeply it impacts.
I hope some of our listeners will definitely take you up on that. That's a relatively simple thing to do, and it seems like it can have a lot of benefits for both. And as we look down the line and envision the future, what are some of the obstacles and challenges that you see going forward? I guess what I'm asking is, what does success look like, right? If this mission, if CUFI's mission, if Federation's mission, if we achieve what we want to achieve, what does it look like out there? What kind of a world do we have? Small question, sorry.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful world. I think I am deeply, deeply disturbed what has happened to our country because of the political environment, the division between us, and it almost reminds me of the Jewish-Christian split of distrust and anger, and you could almost call it anti-ism, anti-liberalism, anti-conservatism, to the point of just disingenuous for our whole nation. And I think we learned from the Jews that we just don't agree on some things. But that doesn't mean we can't be friendly and learn from each other and study the things that are in common. And I used to attend Torah study at a local congregation, and it was fascinating. Of course, we studied the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, but just being in a room and having a cup of coffee with 10, 15 people and a rabbi and studying the commonality of the Old Testament. The Old Testament for us, we call it the Old Testament. I prefer to call it the Tanakh, is our foundation. And it's ripe and full of expressions of where God is leading all of us, Jew or Gentile alike. So I personally think that the spiritual basis is important, and that will grow from that to friendship because we can understand each other on a very important foundational basis.
Right.
I agree. I would say my answer to that question is really the millennial, the Joshua generation. You know, we if they don't, you know, we can't press the baton into their hand. They've got to see the value. They've got, you know, they have to be able to rise to leadership, and they're in an environment that is just ever more challenging, where it's narratives are out of opinions and often without facts to base them on, and so we are. I believe that we all need to prioritize investing in that next generation and making sure that they're equipped and inoculated, and the learning institutions have shifted gears from a place where kids are taught how to think to where they're taught what to think. And your UNM right there in Albuquerque enjoys a fairly infamous reputation as being on the short list when it comes to anti-Semitic or anti-Israel events. And so, no more important community in the country to really roll up our sleeves and try to address and confront that than right there. And so I would say the answer would be just trying to make sure that we're not preaching to the choir, to make sure that we're bringing those young men and women that deserve to be invested in and holding up their arms and putting our hand in the small of their backs so that they can be encouraged to move forward and take their campuses back. Right.
And I'd like to end with a New Mexico question, since we are originating this program from New Mexico. And here in New Mexico, we have a unique mixture of cultural backgrounds, and interestingly enough, New Mexico is also a major trading partner with Israel. Are there ways our collective communities could leverage our collaboration more to improve the cultural climate and understanding of New Mexicans in particular?
You know, there's a movement, and it's raised its head on your campus and in other parts of the community. There's a movement to encourage people to boycott Israeli products and divest any from companies that do business with Israel and try to bring sanctions against Israel, this BDS movement. And I think whatever platform this program can be used for, or to get the word out, is to just the water challenges that you have in New Mexico, that Israel has the identical challenges and they've already solved them. Just so much technology. I was at a dairy farm in southeast New Mexico that was state-of-the-art, cutting-edge technology, makes it one of the highest producing dairy regions in the country. All Israeli technology. It's just everyone's benefiting from Israeli technology without even knowing it. And so I think New Mexico is a shining example of the benefits of partnering and exchanging with Israel. And I know John can add way more to that than somebody that doesn't live there.
It's been beautiful to see some things. I have a TV show on a Christian station called Israel in Focus, and I've had several different people, primarily from Israel, but also Jews and from local. And one of my favorite ones was this group of people that were coming over to visit the Navajo Nation and teach them about water usage. The Jews, it's almost going back, and I don't mean to be sacrilegious, it's almost going back to Moses striking the rock and water coming out. They figured out how to get water from no place. And, it takes one nasty anti-Semite to create problems, but it takes one loving Jew and Christian to overcome that. And again, I can't tell you how proud I am of CUFI, but CUFI is made up of people. It's all this 3,500,000 or whatever it is, people. And those people, each heart has been changed and is being changed. And CUFI can't change hearts, but people can. And I think that's the future of our Christian-Jewish relations, is each one of us being willing to say, I really want to try. And there's some obstacles to overcome, but let's just try. And back to the United States, let's try to agree. Let's try. We're not going to agree on everything, but as a rabbi told me one time, we can agree to disagree agreeably. And I think that's important. So I think it's a one-on-one thing in many ways. National things can happen. We can get a whole bunch of people come together at UNM and stand beside our brothers and sisters in Judaism. But when you leave those rallies, you're going to meet somebody. And every time I go to Israel, I feel I'm more enriched, not because I've seen a Christian shrine, but because I've met a new person that I consider to be a new friend. And that's the foundation, I think, of our hopeful future.
Well said.
That's a wonderful way to wrap things up, and I just want you both to know how appreciative certainly I am, and speaking for the Jewish Federation of New Mexico, for your participation in this event. And we look forward to continuing the conversation, and hopefully we will all make that future together.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
Thank you. Thanks for letting us be a guest.
That's it for this edition of High Desert Radio. Thanks so much for listening. High Desert Radio is the voice of the Jewish Federation of New Mexico. Remember, in order for us to continue providing quality programs like High Desert Radio and to continue our work in service to Jewish seniors, Holocaust survivors, low-income families, children, young professionals, Israel, and more, the Jewish Federation of New Mexico relies entirely on the generosity of listeners like you. Make your contribution today to jewishnewmexico.org. Remember, you can subscribe to this series on iTunes, and be sure to visit us at jewishnewmexico.org. Till next time, for High Desert Radio, I'm David Wolf.